The area we have left to continue building the Lego city is getting smaller and smaller every single day, so we are really running into some serious issues. Since that space I've prepared right now is the very last bit I can still continue building on, but more on that towards the end of the video. For now, let's start building, and first of all, we start with this horse paddock right here and a hill on which now the stable is going to be built. For the stable, I opted for a more open design to allow visitors to actually view inside the stable, and therefore towards the front I've only used 4 pillars. Then we have sloped walls down towards the back wall right there, and now after these 4 pillars in the front are connected, I've quickly added horses to the interior, although I will rework the ground at the end of the video once again. And now everything is finished off with a dark brown roof in order to give the stable a bit more contrast. Right next to the stable, I've added a manure pile with these 2x2 round plates. And then in the center of the paddock, I've decided to add a little feeding area for the horses with some hay right there. Now on to the more exciting part, the next building, which is going to fill up this gap right here. And I've once again decided to build a half-timbered house, although I've switched up the style a little bit and opted for a black roof in combination with medium nougat and reddish brown walls. That then really fits nicely into the color scheme I've chosen for the farm, and also at the same time reuses the style of half-timbered houses I've also used on the right-hand side of the farm right there for the small village, if you remember how the rest of the city looks like at the moment. What I'm building right here is going to be the pigsty, first of all with walls surrounding the area, and then secondly I've decided to add a muddy floor in order to give it a bit of contrast and make it of course a bit more realistic. In this case I've also decided to use the old 2010 era pigs because they simply look more realistic than the modern day version of a pig Lego has released, but they are quite expensive if you know the Bricklink listing prices at the moment. Right next to the pigsty is the chicken coop, built in the exact same style, so it all fits visually together. I've in this case used these flexible brown pieces to make a more rustic woven fence, which you don't see often in modern farms, but it was a very traditional method to build fences back in the day, and I thought it switches up things a bit and looks more interesting, and therefore, although it isn't quite realistic, I'm aware of that, I liked how it turned out. Then for the interior, I once again of course added a few plants and of course a bunch of chickens. Then next up, everything is sort of pulled together in this area by first of all extending the tiling I've also used in other areas throughout this more rural area in the Lego city, and of course a bunch of vegetation, which is always really important. In case you were wondering what these 2 weird boxes right in front are supposed to be, I've decided to add beehives and therefore also this minifigure right there with this little printed child, and I think it's also quite clear to the visitor what this is supposed to be. Now, next up, this shouldn't be as clear as the rest I've built so far, for you at least now, because I've sort of experimented a bit building technique wise. These are Technic bricks used for the interior parts of wheels, for large trucks and so on, and I've now decided to stack them all on top of each other, then finish this cylinder type off with a stud, which I've now used to add this plate on top, and now you might already be able to guess what this is supposed to be. Everything is now raised, and then this is supposed to be a silo for the farm. And I gotta say that I always love finding this creative sort of part usage I've in this case managed to do with Technic wheel pieces, and these 2 silos in this case I've now prepared are now placed outside the farm. The only thing that's now left for me to do is to connect them with the rest of the farm. But we still of course also need to continue on the outside area of the farm as well. For now I'd say let's look on the right hand side of the farm, because we still have this empty part right there in between the forest and the farm we somehow need to fill up. And now in this case I've decided to add tractor tracks right there. Of course in this type of area you won't find any paved streets, and therefore this was much more realistic. And of course since I built these tractor tracks, I've also need to build the tractor. You always spend quite a lot of time on little builds like this, but I think it turned out quite nicely and fits perfectly to the rest of the farm. Now, in order to not simply continue the forest, which would be a bit boring to be honest, I've decided to add a little pond right there. So first of all, I of course have to remove what's already built. That's always quite annoying. And then I've decided to try a new water building technique. I've snotted the water using dark green bricks laid on the side. That is now covered by curved plates, so we don't get any ugly edges. Everything is then finished off with a bit of vegetation, trees and so on. of course a little brick-built dock for the pond right there, and then for the rest I've, at least for now, decided to simply cover everything up with trees. This is now for me to check if the amount of trees and forest would be a bit too much in this area in front. Of course, we still need to increase the level of detail right there, but in general, I'm quite satisfied with how the forest turned out. Now, back to the farm once again, and as I briefly mentioned in the beginning of the video, inside the stable I'm not satisfied with how the ground turned out because I haven't added a ground so far, and that's what I'm doing right now. I've decided to add a mixture of tiles and then a few studs in between in order to have a dark tan floor. Simply looks so much more finished than before, and once again adds a bit of contrast and highlights the stable. I completely missed that at the beginning when building the stable itself. Next up, we got to figure out how to connect the farm with the rest of the city. First of all, at the moment, the farmer who's currently there can't really reach the field in front of the train tracks, so we need to add some sort of connection in this area. And then on the other side of the farm, we need to create a transition from the airport to the rural area over there. So what I'm probably going to do is add a train station diagonally in this section, and then most likely going to recover this street, which currently disappears inside that tunnel right there, and then isn't continued. But as we move to the other side back there once again, this is what I'm talking about. The street is then recovered, coming out of maybe another tunnel portal or something in this area, so we can then also reach the airport not only by train but also by car. And then we always have space issues, but in this area it's even more prominent than in other areas of the Lego City. So I'm currently figuring out how I'm exactly going to connect these parts. So before we move on to the next part of today's video, let me quickly show you today's before and after picture. Of course, there's quite a lot of difference, simply also because we covered this entire section with base plates for now. And now onto the second part of today's video, because last weekend I visited one of the biggest Lego fan exhibitions in Germany, and the models some of the guys brought were so incredible. I thought I just need to show you some of them. First of all, there you can see this was the largest and also one of the best by far models on the exhibition, a giant Japanese inspired layout, and the rock work in there is just incredible. I think over 30 people in total worked on building the different modules. Absolutely insane. Then another of my favorite mocks was this Wild West layout you can see right there. As you probably know, I'm also quite a big Western fan, and therefore this was really inspiring to see. Once again, the rock work in all these mocks was absolutely incredible, and the level of detail, of course, the storytelling. You could literally spend several minutes just looking at one single small part of the entire mock. And then probably the most impressive model that was exhibited was a giant sort of cyberpunk town. The model is called New Hashima, and I think a crew of over 80 people from all around the world worked on this model. It was about 4 meters tall. Absolutely incredible, although I gotta say it isn't really my style of building, but still an absolutely incredible model. And I thought, although it didn't really fit to the rest of the video, I absolutely needed to share some impressions with you. So that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.